Series 93, 123, items 1 through 92. There are two networks by which a man's intelligence is connected to the universe, that of confusion and of clarity. Reflections on history, genealogy, and other stuff like that. After some initial difficulties, one man was able to trace his family tree as far back as Minnesota in 1946. And it turned out that his ancestral tribe's motto was, screw the past and just barely tolerate the present. His eldest son later had a t-shirt printed up that read, if the future ain't now, it ain't nowhere. From a certain diagnostic view, the dissatisfaction men feel at the human level is from a lack of greater understanding. And this lack, in great part, is due to excessive talk and thought. This is from a certain non-standard diagnostic view. Somebody can't hook up like a one-button thing to turn everything on.
Unified field button.
The Popeil button?
Unified field.
Oh, I thought it was the Ron Popeil button. Every time this one guy would get his life just about like he wanted it, he'd die. What a lucky guy. You may be certain that you are fully in the invented, civilized world of man when entertainment must be labeled as entertainment. Hey, Dad, is this another reason that hormones don't have to advertise? Uncle Frank, the fruit farmer, reminds us of this all-too-true truism. From the mouths of babes comes spittle and oftentimes additional infantalia. For that alleged wisdom unique to children can't be all that great, or else they wouldn't eventually turn into adults. Simply growing up around these parts won't actually do you much good. It'll kill you, but that's about it. And that, my friends, is entertainment. When he heard the human mind described as a wild beast, one man thought, that's not so, it's too easily captured. Let's clear up the question of options once and for all in all. It goes like this. Before creation, there was nothing, and nobody cared. After man came along, he wanted to know who did the creating, so he speculated, named it this and that, but it was still mainly nothing. Instead of writing right off to me to complain, theologians, anthropologists, astrophysicists, and literary archivists should send their whines and corrections directly to the Colorado Whitewater Rafting Association, attention, North American Director. Local reality told one guy, hey, don't try and suck up to me. And the guy replied, fuck you. And reality said, hey, can I buy you a drink? One of the, as yet, unrecognized purposes of education is to take a person interested in a particular subject and bring him along to the point where he forgets that he doesn't know anything. Incident heard described from the window of a passing 4D train. One man said, I am on a hunger strike, and his stupidity cried out, feed me, feed me. From another reality, their definition of heaven. Heaven, a place with no random dumb testing. A man's personality is a magnetic pole. Question, what is the difference between a fact and a simile? Uncertainty. Specifically, the inability to believe that a certain something regarding man could actually be true. The purpose of the mind is to create a universe in the head. A father huddled with his son on this one. Don't waste your time worrying over the so-called powers of evil. Because if you try and do something extraordinary with your mind, you'll discover that your real nemesis is the power of gravity and the laws of elasticity. From our unanchored anthropologist's notepad. When any civilization advances to the place where the people want to start having fun, the fact that the first thing they do is invent the beach ball is no accident. There's only one valid criticism of man, and that is that he is dumber than he has to be. One guy's operational rule of civilized, useful etiquette: never shoot a man till he's dead. One man was a mystic. That is, until he learned there was such a word. The source of all thought is thought, which is limiting. The destination of all thought is increased consciousness, which is liberating. There is only one thing for certain, and those who speak of certainty don't know what it is. The source of all pseudo-certainty is thought, which is limiting. A certain consciousness beyond thought, that is, in fact, certain, is silent, and certainly not confining. A lover told a lover after an absence, "I had no idea I would miss you so." And the lover replied, "Nor did I. And would it not be dear if we but so passionately felt the same way about our greater possibility of individual consciousness?" If men did not believe that they are so unlike wolves and cows, they would not be as little unlike wolves and cows as they are now. There are two ways to look at metaphors, like "ah" and like "hmm." And in either instance, they both reveal and conceal. All mysticism ends up as business as usual back in the marketplace. A man suggests, "I do believe that I have a pretty good idea of what it is in the human hunger and experience that you talk about in general. But I do not care for your periodic use of the word mystical in its several forms. Sir, I understand what you intend to mean, but consider this. Those who really know, furthermore, do not like it either. When silence speaks, what are you going to call it when you reply?" Progress report. Those who come to the conclusion that man's ordinary perceptions of reality are upside down are halfway home. Wait, let's play a game again. What do you call progress that doesn't go anywhere? Civilization. Okay, then, try this one. What's the difference between the civilization of the collective and the personal one of a more conscious, individualistic man? The difference is that one of them doesn't actually go anywhere in the span of one mental lifetime. If you think the universe is small now, just wait till you get a full survey of your own head. The name of this brief item is, there is only one kind. If you are a real artist, you're a flim-flam artist. Any performer not smarter than his audience is his own dumbass audience. Considering the theater of his own mind, one man thought, "The nice thing about this venue is I don't have to pay to get in." Nice is as nice does, and this kind of nice just wishes it was. Anyone who gets upset by the basic hormonal antics of others has let something terrible happen to them. They become old. Yuck. They might as well be dead. Yuck. Because that's just where such an attitude toward hormones will take you. Yuck for you, but not for them, because they're still alive. The psychology of geriatrics, fully explained in 7 words or less. Before they go dotty, people get snotty. An older kid still living with his dad notes, "I guess this is another example of why all forms of criticism are potentially injurious, if not at least downright embarrassing, to criticizers while criticisers walk away free." Living at home does have its advantages, not the least of which is that there's always someone around who's dumber than you are. Proof? The proof being that they let you keep staying there. The king told the royal priest, "Not only have you become unproductive, but worse, you've become boring." And the priest replied, "I'm not the royal priest. You're just talking to yourself again." A chap who used to clean the moat to himself softly thought, Having a busy mind of your own is more fun than a one-legged woodpecker at Long John Silver's. Okay, here's the way it is. Life is everything man is not. Independent, creative, and conscious. One man sprayed for roaches, trapped for rats, yet let his mind have free run of the house. In the midst of it all, one human stopped and thought, how did man come to the place of spending so much time in asking himself how he came to such a place? The above scene can be used as an operational definition of just about everything man has contrived and concocted in his post-survival world of mental civilization. Already, on this other world, they changed the name of religion to philosophy, then they changed philosophy to psychology, then psychology to science, and it still don't work. Names, categories, and definitions only mean a lot when the people have adopted an operations manual whose introduction says that they do. A conscious thinker's joy is in his own thinking, then in his own consciousness. Another off-campus definition. Scholar, a man who gave up. This observation from a viewer, quote, there came a particular day when I looked around me and thought, my life is coming apart right before my very eyes. And then later thought that that was fair enough since it originally came together in secret. Then there was this other guy who once noted, if having a mind won't drive you crazy, at least it'll make you wish you were. A dialogue via verse. Food can make you happy, food can make you sad. Are you talking about our stomachs or talking about our heads? Sometimes it's hard to know what to eat when you're not sure where you're going. Is this why in the early stages would-be mystics so often want to withdraw from the crowd in the collective banquet? There is a way in which you can see an increase in consciousness as a kind of clustering from one's own routine thinking. An important news brief from the worlds of the arts, sports, academia, and everywhere else. Only the uncool need act cool. Reassuring medical news. If you live by the tracks and don't have a headache, you don't have a head. One man said to himself, the laws of nature make me sick, then further wondered, how much worse off would I be without them? The basic material available by which a man can undertake a study of life is his own personal life. But if he takes this personally, he'll never learn a damn thing. Civilization what ho? Civilization ah so. One man now states, I care for civilization in the same way it makes me appear to care for my family. And in the same way that a mother snake actually cares for hers. A man convinced against his will certainly meets the minimum definition of a man. Well, at least a civilized man. There are those who will purposefully appear to be ugly so as to help camouflage their stupidity. As he refined his struggle to do what he wanted to do internally, one man ultimately said to parts of himself, all of you who believe that something terrible has happened to you in the past, get the hell out. The ego fully explained and briefly at that. When you're dead, you don't care how they spell your name. Free social tip. The dumb enjoy hearing death, illness, and bad luck talked about. Men continually try to reinvent mysticism, for they unknowingly hope that by giving it a new name, it'll get easier. The true nature of non-physical post-survival conflict. Everyone on the mental bus wants to get off, and since no one knows how, they spend a lot of time picking on one another. One man whose foot got cut off said to his mind, "See, that could happen to you too." And his mind just scoffed. Fat chance. Query, without a mind, can you have a foot cut off? As they turned down the lights and turned up the music in the OR, the surgeon in charge of surgery asked, "Am I the one in charge of surgery?" Query, how can you spot a dumb question when you hear one? If loving some other particular person doesn't make you feel better, here's a fact for you. You don't really love them. In the city, everyone has a philosophy they hope will work. No one has a philosophy that'll work. To encourage them, one father told his children that every time they told their life story or explained what kind of guy they were, a little angel died and another 5 minutes was taken off the life of the universe. And now we have two types of news to bring to you. The fairly acceptable and the just barely acceptable. First, the fairly acceptable. Bad habits won't make you any less conscious. And the just barely acceptable, I'll bet you can guess. How to get the best of civilization and other aspects of man's collective efforts. If you're real clever and constantly stay on your toes and on guard, you can, periodically but with some regularity, save $3, $4, and $5 in the course of things. One local sophisticate mused, "Oh, Socrates almost had it correctly, but not quite. What he should have said was, a life lived at retail is not worth living." "I feel better now," he added. "I believe I'll go home and go to bed." Although the stomach and the mind dance to different tempos, the mind will still do whatever step the stomach dictates. How certain aspects of physics unexpectedly continue to rule much of the world. A short man understands history better if he lies down. Additional note to the alert. Just because something seems to rule the world around these parts doesn't mean that it actually rules the world. One autumn day the king reflected, perhaps the greatest blasphemy ever committed has been in the priest telling men that God made them free-willed, individual sovereignties, and on that basis holds them accountable for the lives they've led. Perhaps spring will come early this year. One guy was going to title his latest book, The Trashing of Life, but then remembered he'd already used that name on his birth certificate. Some neurons whined. It's not fair. Hormones frighten us, but we don't have anyone we can frighten. Speculation number KL4709. Perhaps a change in this situation will be the next level of man's evolution. One guy was a ventriloquist. He didn't have a dummy, he had himself. Sometimes he'd unzip his trousers and have his mind bend over in his lap and he'd tell it, "Speak right into this." A man who cannot pleasantly laugh in private will never get the round trip end of his bus ticket canceled. Another vantage point, another definition. Civilization. A meteor that mistakenly struck our planet. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. I had it wrong. It was a meteor that mistakenly hit humanity in the head. Okay, a pseudo-explanation of mysticism from another view. One man kept his garbage on the table and his food under the sink. But he didn't keep regular food. Since the advent of global electronic networks and satellite communications, one man says he is now linked directly to his brain. Oh, all right. Another fun run at it. In passing, as long as we're in the neighborhood. A mystic. One who doesn't do rewrites. And a fellow figures. I guess if there is such a thing as a real mystic, he'd have to be someone who was neither a mystic nor a non-mystic, and who didn't care which he was or which one anyone believed he was. The fellow then scratches his chin, the fellow looks off in the distance, then says of his description, I guess it'll work for me, and appears to have dropped the subject. A more conscious man has no culture. Well, he does, but it's of a homegrown variety and is thus not visible to others. The combination funny applicant and suspect replied, background? Background? There's no need to check my background, because I ain't got one. And then if I did, I'd swallow it before you'd ever get hold of it. And on one man's private, personal, internal elevator, in the background was played foreground music. Modern hell, a place where all is quiet. No news, no talk shows, no advertising. Well, some would think it was new. When it comes to the seriousness of his relationships, one man says, I'm as sincere with anybody as I am with anyone else. In a world similar to ours, in another universe, the thinking, naming creatures thereon came up with this new term for the two basic forces that seem to run everything. Instead of such notions as good and evil, or truth and error, or progressive or regressive, they label them the forces of hunger and of satisfaction. One man told his mind, look, I'm going off for a while and I may not ever come back, and his mind replied, fat chance. Another way that it's really different. This kind of stuff is not a substitute for anything. Clever men can win design awards, but only life can make a life. Grammatical rhyme of the modern thinker. Examples that use proper nouns aren't proper examples. Being taxed is not being challenged. The former is what ordinary men believe life forcibly extracts from them, while the latter is what more alert men daily seek to be. Being brained is not the same as being conscious. Now, a viewer asks, is being a viewer the same thing as being stupid? If you don't do anything about it, yes. A viewer writes, the reason I haven't written to you is because the correcting function on my typewriter has been broken. Being written to can be both challenging and taxing. The parent told the child, don't put fingers in your mouth. Don't put crayons up your nose. Don't put food on the floor. And the kid responded, well, don't put your thoughts in my head. The reason that actual physical parenthood seems so historically irrelevant with the mystics and transcendental adventurers is that they eventually have to give intellectual birth to themselves anyway. The inherent wild cry of mentally civilized men. Hey, go wake up that conscious calmness and tell him we finally figured out a name for him. Now he can be as restless and disturbed as the rest of us. One guy considered his personal theme song to be, You're going to miss me when I'm gone. And his mind says that for the life of it, it can't figure out who it's aimed at. Extraordinary consumer tip from some other reality. A man who knows and has a great deal is not going to cut you in on the deal unless it's a real mystical deal. And then he doesn't care. One man said, "Don't talk to me about modern hard times. I live off chemicals." A conscious man's business is only his business, and any he has that is not his alone is not his business. The civilized mind of the collective might not care for this, but what the hell? They'll never know. One man realized, I can go days without sleep, weeks without water, months without food, but not even for seconds can I bear to go without this thing held firmly in my mind. Forget throwing away your belongings. The real problem lies in the desire to possess certain thoughts. Two different worlds we live in, or two different live in us. One thing about taking a vacation from your mind is that if you ever do return, it'll be just like you left it. Thank you, travel agents. Local reality told one guy, "You make people laugh too much." And the guy said, "So you're calling me a comedian?" And reality replied, "No, that would be all right. You just make people laugh too much." I believe this was the same guy who had been wanting to ask what the difference is between local reality and local conditions, but he apparently didn't think that this was the right time to bring it up. Looking back over the earlier part of his life, one man thought, I believe I had a lot more fun before I became so much like myself. The initial responsibility of the basic mind is to see that this happens. One of its elective uses is to get you out of it. Update, our time, our place. Some men would rather be dead than civilized. Some would rather kill others than be bored. Note, intellectually, it is always your time, always your place. For many years, one man kept a diary of all the thoughts he had had. Then he began the task of separating them into a list of those that complemented one another and those that conflicted with one another. Shortly after this project was commenced, the book blew up on him. The world of the mind can make you blind, but also make you see. One man thought, sometimes I can't believe how stupid and forgetful I am. And then he'd remind himself that he was still human. Damn it. Post-survival desires aren't really desires at all, but are forms of mental restlessness and uncertainty. The civilized world is built on words and can be smothered by them. Upon hearing this, one man yelled to his son, "Quick! Bring all the verbal blankets you can find." That was all in English. Wasn't it? Men's personality, the illusion of individuality. There's this kind of trick thing that more conscious people do with their consciousness. One father sat down with his son for this one. The troubling side of being mystically inclined at an early age is that you want to take seriously those things such as truth, religion, reality, and growth, which adults now consider at best frivolous pastimes and distractions. And God help you should you not ever get over it when you get older. They stood, and the father gently slapped the boy on the back as he walked away, personally hoping, as some of you might suspect, that he wouldn't. Out on a hillside alone, a certain man smilingly thought to himself, once you know the secret, it can almost drive you crazy not being able to step back into the actual experience of it anytime you want. He smiles some more. What else are you going to do? Except maybe slap yourself eternally on the back, hoping, too, that you'll never give in. If you ain't one of a kind, you ain't none of a kind. Now let's start at the end. We've been around the edges of this for a while anyway. The father was talking to his son and said the troubling thing about being mystically inclined, and since so many people in the items I wrote tonight take exception to that, being inclined to want to do something drastic, to do something extraordinary internally, intellectually, whatever it was that you thought at some early age, whatever would have been an appropriate example in your case. The father says the troubling side of it is if you are so inclined, if you have that kind of interest at an early age, then what you want to do is take seriously those very things that adults already consider just to be frivolous, just meaningless. And this is not sarcasm. Such things as truth, religion, reality, growth. People who believe, we'll have to back up a little maybe, but I even point out that those who believe that reality, that man's perceptions of reality may be upside down or backwards or at least halfway home, which if you take it as being a challenge instead of a form of taxation on your parsimonious brains, then it's supposed to challenge you in some way. We won't stop and go in how it is if you think that reality, the perception of reality is upside down, how you'd be halfway home. If you're going to take it any further down any kind of sequential logical highway, drive at your own risk. But there is still remaining what is, I suggest, useful, that I'll bring up, that you could look at aspects of life from what at first would seem to be, and I even encourage it, as I set it up this way, that you could, many people have, and they still would fall for it, that you would say, no, wait a minute, ordinary people feel a certain way about life. Just ordinary, decent, sane people, they look at life in a certain way. And yet there are a few people who take a different view, as they have a different interest, a different hunger, and they look at it in a different way. And you don't have to say anymore. All you got to do is show some sign that you're talking about the same area that interests the people. And without having to point out, you feel superior. You feel different, but in a way that, as far as you're concerned, is obviously, whether you feel superior or not, you feel that your interest, the way that you're attempting to look at life, is better. It is more potentially enlightening, revealing. Am I correct? It just is. Not because I say so, it simply is. You would not be reading books on philosophy, social observation, any form of would-be mysticism or transcendental practices and thought, unless you believed. You don't even have to analyze it. You may have already realized years ago that this is not a widespread interest. It's not as common a weekly pastime with most of your friends as bowling, perhaps. And so you realize it is a certain limited interest, but you never question the fact that the interest, whether you're ever getting anywhere with it or not, and we're not playing some form of neurotic inflation of your old ego, even worse, it's not that you feel better or superior to start with. If you do, then you're safe. You might as well be bowling, because you're not going anywhere except in the gutter anyway. You simply take the interest. You take the interest. Forget you. You take your interest, the interest that you seem to natively have in matters extraordinaire. And you do finally find out, even after your parents and your priest and rabbi and everybody goes, well, you know, all you got to do is have the least bit of persistence, and you will finally stumble into, if nothing else, the philosophy or psychology section of your elementary school library. And they'll have one or two little books, and you'll look, and you'll think, well, at least. I'm not the only person in the world that wonder what in the hell's going on around here with people. And you see that here it is, people serious enough, or somebody took them serious enough that they actually had a book published here in hardbound. You know, a legitimate company, it looks like, from a legitimate city. So you take some heart. You never question the fact that that kind of interest, not you personally, but that sort of interest is in some way at a higher level, is better, more promising. It simply is. No one questions that, even those who might not pursue it. If you said, wouldn't you think that people who try to sit around and reflect on the nature of life or think about it, wouldn't you say that's probably better, greater interest, more promising? Just it's a better area of interest than to stay home every night and get drunk and sit in front of the TV. And even people sitting and drunk in front of the TV would probably go, yeah. It's not just a joke. I just want everybody knows where we are now. That could give you one little build up. We're back to the possibility of a conspiracy that makes every conspiracy theory you ever heard about sound like something that came off the back of a cereal box. What if that interest, now let's assume now that we're past the point of sham humility and etc., that everyone seeing this and anyone who might see it later on a videotape somewhere, that they're interested enough, they're sitting there and go, yes, I've always been interested in what I think you're talking about and that sort of thing. You do not question the fact at all. I mean, you consider it dumb if I say, well, how many people here consider if you have an interest in matters outside, in the true sense of transcendental or metaphysical, with no occult or spiritual or religious meaning, that you just believe that it's possible? In one of the definitions of mystic, to know reality more point blank, to know that there is something going on besides what is commonly accepted as going on, all the many descriptions. Any sane person in the world would go along with it. You know, if you didn't push it and you say, we're not talking about anything too strange, we're not talking about druggy people, we're not talking about cults, we're talking about, you've had everyone from whatever culture they're from, you could pull out their religious heroes and say, now if you take away the ritualistic patina for a second from Buddha, from Jain, from Zarathustra, from Moses, from Jesus, and if you just listen, they're talking about, now just for a second, no offense to them, but if you just take away what seems to be now what we consider the religious aspect, they were talking about, and I could start doing it, but you can do it, you can pull out all their famous and their obscure remembered words, and it all is pointing about that there's some way that you could know things that you can't normally know, just walking around, spitting in the dirt and, you know, slopping the hogs and just doing what people ordinarily do. And it normally has come out in the Western world as like the unexamined life is not worth living. That sort of thing. That reflection would be good and worthwhile. That it is possible that a man, through some sort of internal effort, through something, that it's possible in a rational way with no crackpot overtones, that it's got to be possible that there's people have experience and they perceive what's going on in life in a way that is not normally known. That being an accepted part of what I'm trying to point out, then no one questions. I mean, they would consider it a dumb question after I did all that. And I said, well, now, everyone knows what we're talking about. And everyone goes, yeah, that's all right. Who would consider that sort of interest, just in some way, no offense to any other interest in life, but who would consider that that is quite likely a higher level of human interest than bowling or football? No offense to them, but, and everyone would go, well, that's dumb, but okay, yeah, I would. Are you sure? What if it is this great conspiracy? Back to what the guy was telling his kid. He said the trouble with getting, at an early age, the trouble with being born with this kind of interest is that you take things seriously, certain aspects, and he names them, which is, you know, if you didn't know us better what was doing here, you think, well, now, you're taking kicks at those things again, or at humanity. No, no, no. He points out that the trouble is with doing that at an early age, if that has already happened to you, you find yourself fulfilling that kind of role, you take things seriously, such as, I'm not going to name anything else, but religion, truth, reality, the idea of growth and change. The very things that seem to be the heart of a civilized man, right? The Father says, the trouble is, you take these things seriously, whereas adults have already gone past that and they just consider them meaningless, frivolous distractions. Not an attack. Not an attack. And he's not even saying that the adults are attacking it. They just consider, how about this kid, this illusionary kid here, that it strikes him at some age when he begins to ask the questions that the first thing that should strike anybody almost anywhere on this planet, a kid like that, the first place he'd want to look would be the local priest or shaman or somebody to, it's got to be in the religious context, whatever they call it. And then, of course, you find out that they are not in that business. They might hand you a book. In the Western world, they might in any place, if they had any writings, they might hand you something that's considered a little too extreme probably for the ordinary masses showing up for their services, but if they have any literature of a mystical nature, a priest or a rabbi, the guy might go, well, here, read this. That's the kind of stuff you're talking about, but that's not what we're here for. This is something else. So, the child would think, would he not, correctly so, from that basis, that, well, they got off the track. What if they didn't get off the track? Or the child would think, we'll have to call it a certain kind of critical view, the child would think, well, wait a minute. They admitted that was the original interest. They even state here in the introduction, the prospectus, the advertisements for their religion, our local religion, that this is what men should do, and yet the head guy tells me, well, that's not what we really do. We say that is, but it's not. We show up and we do rituals, and we do feely good, and we do things that are good for the community, stabilizing, civilizing influence. What you're talking about is, that's not for everybody. So the kid, from that viewpoint, remember that we're talking about somebody that has an extraordinary interest, that never questions that the interest is in some way of a higher level than just ordinary interest. He would see that religion in this case, but we could pick out education, philosophy, culture in general, the arts, but religion's the easier one to see, then he could say, well, they have fallen down. My father's right. I look around now, and adults, they don't take this seriously. And he would see it as a what? As a valid critique. Whether he got all mad and upset, but he would see it as a failure on their part. What if it is not? What if they are correct in seeing it as a meaningless distraction? And it's only the kid that stands there outside a temple or a church, whatever seems to be the religious, whatever service they're having, and thinking, God, are they on the wrong track? Or maybe he'll listen to what they teach, what they sermonize, and think, God, the words are right on it. That is exactly what I've been thinking about. That's the very thing I'm interested in. And they don't take it seriously. And he could almost get pissed, almost get disturbed about the nature of civilized reality, that how can they do that? How can they go there Sunday after Sunday, or Saturday after Saturday, or Tuesday after Tuesday, and sit there and go, yeah, and listen to that, because the words, the whole scenario, the whole background is almost on it. I'm just sure it is. And they sit there and go, yeah, and they do it for an hour, and they get up and do some little dance or do some kind of little ritual, and throw in a few dollars and walk out and seem to forget it until next Tuesday or Saturday or Sunday. How can they do that? God, how'd they go wrong? And they don't see the seriousness of it. In my little scene, the Father says, I quote, the troubling side of being mystically inclined at an early age is, he's telling his own son, the troubling aspect is that you want to take seriously those things such as blah, 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 which adults consider at best frivolous pastimes and distractions. Being able, I will assume, of not drowning within the words right or wrong or with a better attitude or with a lesser understanding of it. Just take in general the scene I'm trying to paint for you, which we're surrounded by. We've been surrounded by it at any point in history. If we move back contemporaneously, anyone who was interested in this, and they can't get to it, one of the first areas that they see that has fallen, that just seems to be almost inexplicable. How could religion, whatever their religion is, it doesn't matter, even mythological religions, how could they have started out in their words, their descriptions, their tales? If I listen to them metaphorically standing out here, they're right on the money. I mean, they're almost to the point that I want to rush in there and say, well, you've almost got the secret. You're holding out on me. Tell me what it is. And yet I see they get through after an hour, 90 minutes, once a week. And my father, my uncles, everybody, the head guy, they leave and it's like, well, you know, they went to a nightclub. Except they didn't have a hangover, as I could see. They went bowling, but they didn't have to rent shoes. And they see it as a criticism. What if that's not exactly right? The kid, metaphorically, allegorically, or literally, the kid sees the adults, even after his father points it out. His father simply pointed out to him what the kid had already obviously felt. The father points out, the danger is you're going to take seriously the things that adults now consider to be frivolous, irrelevant distraction, just entertainment. And the kid would want to go, yeah, you're right. But what the father would want to do is grab him and say, yeah, but you don't know how right I am. Because the kid won't say, yeah, I want to. No. Do you understand that life, back to those of you that always like to hear, if this does not get too rococo, this makes all these stories of conspiracies and triple and quadruple spies within spies, and you can't tell where you are in a hall of mirrors. That's nothing. This one's just in your face. It's like you looking out for you. Hey, they won't trick me like this. There is something very serpentine going on here, and they're trying to weave around and get me distracted. It could be. It's that kind of distraction. You go, yeah, trying to fool me. And you see all these lines and all these things, and what you don't realize, it's the lines on the hand right against your eyes. That's to wit this. That rather than seeing, let's just stick, I'm going to trust you being grown-up people in your brains, let's just leave it at a general form of criticism, concern, but criticism in the widest possible, something approaching almost an objective view of someone, a kid, looks at religion, looks at what should be the keeper, what should be the vehicle to move a man towards some transcendental knowledge through some experiences not ordinarily available. And I don't mean, handling snakes and getting bit to where you pass out and, think, boy, I had an experience. Or keep sliding around to get enough wine during communion. They, not that. And but it would appear to be a valid form, quote, of a criticism that religion missed it. People go there and they say, well, yes, I'm serious. And they'll pay their money for their pew or their seat there in the temple, and they'll do all this, and they'll show up, once a week and look very serious about it and going, yes, oh, yes. And then walk right out, and the kid looks and he says, they don't take that seriously at all. What if the conspiracy is that's what you're supposed to do? Now, do you understand? Now, here's where it gets really good. It gets so greasy. It makes Hardee's French fries, look kind of like they got sandpaper finish. That you see, and beyond religion now, if you can take it wider, you can just see the whole attitude of humanity. You can just look at all of humanity like, well, people don't understand the purpose of life, but it's easier to narrow it down to one area like religion. The slickness of a conspiracy of life looking after itself would be that it knows where the future is going. compared to us, compared to the components within it. And it knows that the future is always hanging around. Yeah. Like men around your good-looking teenage daughter. There's just always a few hanging around the back fence. And that's the way life is, because it is not sequential in the sense that man thinks. So part of what seems tomorrow to us, the future, somebody's around here today. It always has been. So how to handle that? How to keep it in line? The parts that smell tomorrow, the kinds hanging around your good-looking daughter, which you can consider that to be tomorrow's state of consciousness, an increased state of consciousness. That's what you're all after. Rather than that get out of line, what if it makes it get concerned over the fact that today's level of consciousness is people don't see how stupid they are. They don't see that they keep talking about tomorrow. And they say, yes, we're deadly serious about it. And then they walk out and forget it. How can they do that? What if that is the right attitude? And what helps keep the little people outside the tent, the guys hanging around the daughter of tomorrow, tomorrow's the future, tomorrow's consciousness, they stay mainly involved with, or to a large part, enough that it keeps everything, they don't take it seriously. I mean, they're in there doing these rituals, they're reading these kind of works, they're repeating words from 5,000 years ago, and I want to jump in there and strangle them. Because they're saying the very words, I can't beat it. If I tried to describe it, if I tried to describe what I understand, thinks a kid, I couldn't beat this. Any religion, it doesn't matter what the hell building he's standing outside of, and he thinks, yet I see them walk out, and they do not take it seriously. They sit there and say, oh yes, and they do not. What if that is the correct attitude? Rather than looking upon them as being Philistines and dunderheads or Sunday Christians or Saturday Jews, what if that is it? That it is to them just a meaningless distraction. But you don't take it seriously. And they think the kid's nuts. Except if you're one of the ones wired up to be a would-be transcendental adventurer, you got no choice. You keep smelling for the thread somewhere. You keep looking. Well, does somebody leave some breadcrumbs somewhere that I can follow the trail? And every time you get there, you find it's people, picking them up and eating them or, kicking them. And you think, you fools, what the hell are you doing? And they think, hey, it's just breadcrumbs. It's just entertainment. But you go to church every Sunday or whenever, and you sit there, you and all those other people, and you sing, and you stand up, and you sit down, and you kneel down, and you do all these rituals, and you walk right out and forget it. They think, what the hell? You go bowling, you bowl, you get through, you don't go home and the rest of your life all week you talk about bowling. And a would-be mystic though thinks, it's not the same thing. Conspiracy time. Are you sure? No. Are you positive? Nope. No, you're not. The reason I bring this up is not to criticize or to analyze humanity to death, but the thing is, you waste energy that you're not even aware of. You keep trying to follow exactly. Even if you think, well, they're not on the right track, you still pursue things in a manner of criticizing them. In a manner of being concerned, well, wait a minute, this book, and it doesn't have to be just a religion, it can be something else, it can be a general philosophy, it can be an attitude toward politics. And you stay involved, you just don't notice it. It eats up part of your energy that, wait a minute, this is so close, because I could use, probably I should go ahead now, I could start using psychology, I could use the arts, I could use theories of government, actual operations of government, that nowadays government has always been pieced up, but as all of you should think in a certain way, especially in the, worldwide now, the government is almost religion. The people look at it as like, well, wait a minute, I don't have a good job. Instead of honoring to God, send down manna from heaven, and we think from Marxism, hey, I want a job program here. I want a job. I don't have enough money. I want a job. And it's not, you can laugh, but nowadays it's not funny because somebody will go, you're right, let me take your name. There may be a program showing up, like they're just going to come out of nowhere. It's the same thing as saying, well, God, this big old figure up there in this black velvet sky, if I do it right, he'll open up and drop it down. You could take any of the examples, anything that man, any aspect of the civilized mental world, and you can see that it fails. And it especially seems glaring to would-be mystics when they look at would-be mystical areas in that world, such as religion. And they go, well, it doesn't work. And on top of that, you people that should be making it work or be concerned, you sit there like idiots and you go, yes, 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 and you snap and leave. What if they're not idiots? And what if the danger, the father was telling him, the troubling aspect he was telling his own son is, you start off taking this seriously. When those are already adults, those that you're looking to for some kind of guidance, or you think they got to be on the right track, they already consider it's bowling. Now, if he was an ordinary kid, he could still go, well, even if you're right, I don't like it. Well, you can not like it all you want to. You could spend another 60 years and keep snapping your little foot. Maybe that's one way you can tell a mystic. He always limps when he gets old. One of his Zen steps is completely down from all of his life going, well, I don't like it.